Welcome everybody. Today has been the first symposium section of the Kaput Center for the academic year 2014-15, and right now we are at the preliminary talk section of Professor Marilyn Frankenstein. I want to introduce her briefly before she gives her talk. Marilyn Frankenstein is a professor at the College of Public and Community Service, one of the 6 colleges at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. The focus of her work is convincing people that quantitative reasoning is vital to understanding and acting to create a more just world, and that all of us can understand and reason quantitatively. She has taught courses in quantitative reasoning, understanding arguments, and media literacy. Currently, she uses her learning from teaching critical mathematics literacy to teach interdisciplinary courses in media and society, and media literacy, art, and activism. She has written about the curricula she develops, covering such topics as the mathematics of political knowledge and the politics of mathematical knowledge. In addition to numerous articles and book chapters, she has written a text, Relearning Mathematics, that teaches quantitative reasoning in an interdisciplinary context as part of the knowledge we collectively need to create a more just world. She is currently working on Go Figure, A Half-Life in the Struggle to Count, an edited collection of her articles interspersed with political and professional memoir. She is also co-editor, along with Rutgers University professor Arthur Powell, of Ethnomathematics, Challenging Eurocentrism in Mathematics Education. She has spoken about this work internationally, including in South Africa, Mozambique, Brazil, Denmark, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, England, Greece, Canada, and across the United States. In April 2014, she was a recipient of the Clara Lemley Social Activist Award, honoring women who have been working for the larger good their entire lives in the tradition of those who sparked so many reforms in the aftermath of the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire over 100 years ago. It's our pleasure to have her, and now I want to leave the podium for her to help us understand what it means to be beyond math content. Thank you.
A couple of prefaces. I'm going to try to read some of this talk simply to get it in, because I usually just talk extemporaneously, but it may not work. Another preface about my speaking style. Those of you who spoke with me earlier see. I used to say I speak in parentheses, but that I eventually closed them all. Then I read in a book by Anne Fadiman a Hmong saying that works better to summarize how I talk and think. The English translation is to speak of all kinds of things. That saying is often used at the beginning of an oral narrative as a way of reminding listeners that the world is full of things that may not seem to be connected but actually are. That no event occurs in isolation, that you can miss a lot by sticking to the point, and that the storyteller is likely to be rather long-winded. So that's one of the reasons I'm trying to read this, so I can be extra focused. But that is a long-winded way of saying I'm going to start this talk with an analysis from ESPN host Bomani Jones on the real Donald Sterling, the former owner of the LA Clippers basketball team. How many of you know about what happened with that? I'm going to make a connection to mathematics education for social justice afterwards. But in the first part of his discussion, which I'm not going to play, and hopefully we put it at the right spot and that works, Bomani Jones comments how all the fuss about Sterling's personally racist remarks that to his girlfriend, this made big play, and he got kicked. He had to sell, of course he made billions, but he had to sell his team. Bomani Jones says these personally racist remarks to his girlfriend were such a fuss because it's a good opportunity for white people to be outraged at racism when they don't have to do anything about it, when it's not the kind of institutional racism that steals people's lives. Addressing structural, institutional racism would involve actually doing something, actually risking something. Instead, those white people expressing the easy outrage at Sterling's personal racism can avoid acting when it's difficult. And they can fall back on, I spoke out against Sterling's racist remarks. So now, let's see if I can figure out how to do this little piece. I want to bring up the whole thing, but it's this one. And it looks, okay, so this is a bit of a long clip. It's worth listening. Right? This is for my friends, is a commentator. Oops.
No. Why? Like, I mean, the things that Sterling did, I don't want to make this too personal, but this is a very important thing to me. I had a very good friend of mine die on Friday night going into Saturday in Chicago, and there's really no director. She had planned an anti-violence rally, and she attended that rally that she helped organize on Friday and died that night on her block, and we have no idea who shot her. We probably will never know who wound up shooting her. We hear all this stuff that goes on in Chicago and all these people who die, who lose their lives. On one hand, we lose the humanity because there's so many people that we don't think the personalize them. I just gave you the person. She and I were close enough that she put me in her husband's wedding party because of the level of close we are. These are people I watched her grow into a person that would organize a rally like the one after which she died, right? All that stuff that's happening in Chicago was a byproduct of housing discrimination. I was talking to somebody today who would tell you there are large swaths of land in Chicago in between, like, the south suburbs and downtown, just on the south side, that people simply don't live in. Because in Chicago, when black people moved to that city from the south in the 1940s and 1950s, white people got the hell out of Dodge. They built a freeway system that ran through black neighborhoods, and the whole purpose of that freeway system was to get white people from the suburbs into their jobs safely without having to make any stops in between. That's what housing discrimination does. Housing discrimination is the biggest reason that we could point to historically for why we got all these dead kids in Chicago, fight for turf, fight for real estate, with poor accommodations and facilities and everything that you're supposed to have within the city, poor education, all of this, because the tax dollars and everything else decided to move away. And a lot of people like to use it as a strategy to avoid that. It's like to find an apartment in one of those nice neighborhoods so then they can send their kids to nicer schools and have a chance for their kids to go somewhere in life. Instead, when you can't do that, you wind up in basically where like these neighborhoods that are created by apartheid, and they're desolate, and they're dangerous, and they're frightening, and we just have whole generations of people that we have given up on. And the biggest reason that this sort of thing has happened is because jackwagons like Donald Sterling make this decision that they do not want black people or Mexicans or anybody else living near these pristine white people who are trying like hell to get away from us, and they point at us and wonder why all your stuff is messed up. That's the stuff that Donald Sterling has been doing forever. Everybody talks about that settlement in 2009. He was originally sued in 2003 for this housing discrimination. In 2006, we got a hold of the paperwork where he said that black people smell and attract vermin and that Mexicans just sit around and drink all day. His wife was going around to those properties, knocking on the door like it's some Henry Ford stuff, and taking inspection, posing as though she worked for the government there while she was tracking the ethnicities of the people who lived in their buildings. And you're going to come to me and talk about what's going on with Donald Sterling and his mistress? Are you kidding me? That stuff was real. That stuff matters. That stuff literally kills people. And everybody and their mom is so charged up about Donald Sterling. So I'm going to go to a funeral next week for somebody who took somebody else's bullet because that city's become a war zone, and the people that have money and the people who could possibly do something to fix it ignore it and go to their homes in the south suburbs that for the last 70 years people have tried their damnedest to keep black people out of. But I'm supposed to get charged up because Donald Sterling said his rich friends don't want his black mistress to be around black people. People need to get their hands out their clavings and realize that this here is fun to talk about, but this is nothing. The real stuff that happened was that. So when all these guys get up here and stand on their soapbox and wag their fingers and start talking about, oh, we won't tolerate this racism, we won't tolerate what Donald Sterling said, what they're not tolerating about Donald Sterling is the fact that what he said was impolite and what he said was gauche. That's what their problem is. But when Donald Sterling was out here toying with people's lives on things that really matter as matters of life and death, the media, the NBA, these sponsors, and all these people now who want to get patted on the back for what good people they are, didn't say a mumbling word. They can all kiss my behind, every single one of them. Because when we start looking at all these people in these lists who are dying as an economic byproduct of the people like Donald Sterling, and you now have a problem because, oh my God, he said something that intimated that he doesn't respect his players, I'm calling you out as a fraud.
Alright, let me kind of stop it there and go back to the slideshow. That's just that one. Let me ask you, what do you think the connections to social justice education are? And what he was saying?